He arrived just after breakfast, the spoon still in the bowl and the radio low. His grandfather sat at the kitchen table with a small cassette recorder he'd pulled from a drawer of batteries and rubber bands. The old man had a look he used to wear when fixing clocks, focused, patient, a little proud. He pressed record, cleared his throat, and laughed into the tiny silver grill. The sound came back through the speaker thin, bright, unmistakably his. The grandson watched the surprise rise on the old man's face, the way his eyes warmed, like he had just met himself at the door. "Listen," the grandfather said, rewinding with a practiced thumb. He pressed play. The room filled with a boyish laugh that did not seem to belong to the body making it. The grandson laughed too, but carefully. He had learned that sudden emotion could make the old man retreat, the doctor had suggested. Puzzles and names on sticky notes. None of it felt like him. Recording his own laughter did. He labeled the first tape in slow, careful letters, "April laughs." Then he did another. He counted the seconds aloud as the sound played back. 9, 10. "Good," he said, satisfied, like a mechanic hearing an engine settle. In the following days, the routine took shape. He would sit at the table, in the same chair, point the microphone at his mouth, and try again. Some mornings the laugh came out as a cough. Some mornings it arrived strong on the first try. "Still me," he'd say, and the grandson would nod. He brought blank cassettes from the electronics shop to buses away, because the old man wanted the exact brand that never squeaked. Small slips began to show in places that mattered. A neighbor's name lost mid-greeting, a pan left on low, the keys in the freezer. When the grandson gently pointed these out, the old man waved them off with the joke he always used, saving room for the good memories, and then recorded another laugh. As if to prove he meant it, in the grocery store, he tested the recorder beside the apples. At the park bench, he did it again between birdsong and buses. The grandson started timing his visits around these little sessions, not to supervise, but to witness. The recorder gave the old man purpose that sounded like joy. One evening, while the old man dozed, the grandson rewound a tape and listened alone. The room, ordinary in every way, changed shape with that sound in it. Laughter layered with the soft hiss of magnetic tape, the click at the end, the pause after. He noticed how the old man breathed in before each attempt, building courage from the lungs up. He put the recorder back, exactly where it had been. As he left, the old man stirred. "Did you hear it?" he asked without opening his eyes. "I heard it," the grandson said. "Good," the old man whispered. "Then it won't forget me." The tape rolled to silence. The grandson stood in the doorway longer than usual. Counting heartbeats, he could not rewind. A week later, the phone rang early. The old man's voice sounded steady, but the words came out thin. "Bring me the laughter," he said. By the time the grandson arrived, the recorder sat on the table in plain sight. The problem wasn't finding it. It was remembering how to make it speak. "Here," the grandson said, pressing play. The familiar burst filled the kitchen. The old man listened, with his head tilted, as if the sound were coming from the ceiling. "Feels close," he said. "I know that, man." "It's you," the grandson answered. The old man frowned, then imitated the recorded laugh, matching pitch like someone tuning a guitar. The copy was good, but not exact. "Almost," he said finally. "Almost me." He wrote a note on an index card play and taped it beside the button. The grandson added a second card, rewind, a third label. It helped until a DIDN single quotes 2 tapes multiplied across the apartment. On the bookshelf, by the television, in a drawer where socks should have been. Some were neatly dated. Others wore names like weather, rain, blue morning. Better now. Sometimes he recorded over the tail end of another laugh, so 2 versions of him overlapped, one strong, one tired like footsteps on the same path. The grandson began a simple inventory in a notebook. Tape number, location, mood. It felt practical, and also like building a small museum before the building forgot its address. They tried other sounds at the therapist's. Suggestion as whistle. The clink of spoon and cup. The creak of his favorite chair. He humored them all, then returned to the laugh. "A story can wander," he said, tapping the recorder, "but this tells the truth fast." Late one afternoon, after a good session, the old man asked the question he had avoided. "When I can't tell, that's me, will you still play it?" The grandson said yes, before the fear could finish forming. The old man nodded. "Then the house will remind me even if I can't." That evening, as the grandson put on his coat, the old man pressed record again and gave the microphone a softer version. Almost a sigh, and then, barely audible, added, "Remember me." The grandson paused in the hall, hand on the doorframe, listening to a prayer made of air. He did not step back in. Some promises are kept best by leaving the room. When he returned the next morning, The recorder was still turning. The tape long since run to the clear leader, the machine humming into absence. He clicked stop, rewound, and set it gently beside a fresh stack of blank cassettes. The old man looked relieved, though he hadn't noticed the noise. "Is it time?" he asked. "It's time," the grandson said, and pointed to the card that said play. The room waited for the sound that had begun to carry them both. By midsummer, the old man's laughter had started to sound different. The grandson noticed it first in the recordings. A pause before the breath, a lower tone, a small hesitation as if the body had to remember the order of joy. He didn't mention it aloud. He only nodded and smiled when the old man asked, "Still the same, right?" The tapes multiplied. Stacks of them now lived on the shelves beside the kitchen radio, inside drawers that used to hold letters. The grandson organized them in boxes, each labeled by month. He used the word archive again, but the old man had stopped understanding what it meant. "I just like the noise," he said one morning. "The part before it starts." It was the first time the grandson realized his grandfather no longer remembered what the machine was for. The laughter had become sound detached from purpose, a loop of life running for its own sake. Still, the ritual continued. After breakfast, he'd sit at the table, press record, and release whatever came out, sometimes laughter, sometimes a hum, sometimes a single word that drifted off before reaching sense. Visitors came less often. The doctor spoke of plateaus and inevitable slides, words that sounded too polite for what was happening. The old man would greet the nurse warmly, then ask her name again minutes later, embarrassed but graceful. He laughed to fill the gap, then tapped the recorder as if that explained everything. One afternoon, the grandson found him sitting in the dark, headphones on, the cassette worry. He was smiling faintly, mouthing along with his own voice. "Listen," he said when the grandson entered. "He sounds happy." The use of he instead of I landed like a stone. The grandson sat beside him, not correcting, just listening. They stayed that way until the tape clicked. That night, the grandson began making digital copies of the cassettes, terrified that the old machine would one day eat the tape. He labeled each file carefully, copying the handwriting onto the screen. Garden laughs. Blue morning. Still me. The screen felt too clean for what it contained. He missed the hiss, the warmth, the fragility of the real thing. The next day, the old man called from the kitchen. "Come quick," he said. "It's talking back." The grandson hurried in, half afraid, half curious. The recorder was on, playing an old tape he'd accidentally recorded over weeks ago. Layers of sound laughter on laughter spilled out, overlapping until they became something unrecognizable. The old man clapped, delighted. "It remembers more than I do," he said. The grandson didn't correct him. Some lies protect better than truth. Autumn arrived earlier than expected, and with it, a quieter version of the house. The grandson found the recorder still on the table, untouched for days. The old man had forgotten it existed. "Where's your little machine?" the grandson asked gently. "The one that catches your laugh?" The old man looked puzzled, rubbing his thumb against the edge of his chair. "Was that mine?" The tapes still filled the shelves, dozens of them, all perfectly labeled, but now they were just boxes of noise. The grandson played one softly, hoping it would trigger something. The old man listened, frowning. "He sounds like he's having a good time," he said. The grandson smiled. He was. For the rest of the afternoon, they sat together, listening to the laughter of a man who was still alive but already fading into the past. The sound felt strange, now too young, too certain. The old man tapped his knee in rhythm with it, a reflex of recognition that lived deeper than memory. After a while, he asked, "Do I still laugh like that?" "Sometimes," the grandson said. "Not always, but sometimes." "Then keep the ones that sound real," the old man replied, nodding toward the shelf. "The rest are practice." It was the most lucid thing he'd said all week. For a few seconds, his eyes cleared, sharp and familiar. The grandson tried to hold the moment, but it slipped away as quickly as it came. The old man turned to the window, distracted by a passing bird. "That one knows my name," he murmured. The doctor called later that evening, asking for updates. The grandson described the changes, the confusion, the quiet spells, the sleep that lasted too long. "He's moving further in," the doctor said softly. "You'll have good days. Use them." That night, the grandson sat on the porch while the house breathed behind him. Through the open window, he could hear the faint echo of a tape still playing inside. The old man had found the play button again. His laughter, thin but steady, rose and fell between the walls, like a candle trying to stay lit. The grandson closed his eyes and let the sound carry him somewhere older, back to the summers, before forgetting. When laughter wasn't something you had to keep safe, when it belonged to the air and to everyone who heard it. In November, the grandson discovered that his grandfather had begun recording over the same tapes. It wasn't intentional. The routine had become muscle memory. Each morning, he'd press record without rewinding, layering new laughs over old ones. The result was a chorus 3. Sometimes 4 versions of his voice weaving in and out of time. At first, the grandson wanted to stop him, to save what was left. But one evening, as the old man sat smiling at the recorder, he realized something. The overlaps didn't ruin the memory, they deepened it. The old man's laughter had learned to coexist with itself. It's imperfect but whole. He started to notice patterns in the confusion. The old man no longer asked about names, but remembered emotions. He couldn't recall who had visited yesterday, yet when the grandson entered, he always smiled with relief, as if the heart recognized what the mind could not. They spent evenings listening to the tapes together. Sometimes they didn't speak for an hour, letting the voices fill the space between them. The grandson began to hear the disease itself in the recordings, not as silence, but as echo, the sound of time folding back on itself. One afternoon, the old man asked him to find a specific tape. The one where I said something important, he explained, though he couldn't remember what. After an hour of searching, they found it. The label read simply, "For later." The grandson pressed play. Static first, then breathing, then a younger version of the old man's voice. "If you're listening to this, it means I forgot again. So let me tell you what matters. You were here. You made me laugh. That's enough." The grandson sat frozen. The old man leaned forward, eyes wide, as if hearing someone else entirely. "He sounds kind," he whispered. "He is," the grandson said. That night they recorded a new one together. The old man laughed first, then gestured for his grandson to follow. Their laughter tangled, one old, one young, both real. The recorder captured it all, a duet of survival. When the tape clicked off, the old man smiled faintly. "Now it's yours too," he said. The grandson didn't know it yet, but that would be the last full tape they'd make together. Winter crept in quietly, the kind that turned the windows to mirrors and the air to static. The grandson arrived one morning to find the recorder sitting open on the table, the tape half unraveled like a wound. His grandfather stared at it helplessly. "It stopped laughing," he said. The cassette had jammed. When the grandson wound it back with a pencil, the ribbon was creased, fragile as a dried leaf. "We can fix it," he promised. The old man shook his head. "Maybe it's tired." The doctor had warned him that fatigue would set in not only in the body, but in the will to hold on. The old man no longer remembered why the recordings mattered. "They're yours," he told his grandson. "You keep them safe. I think I'm done listening." But that evening, when the grandson prepared dinner, he caught a soft sound from the living room. The recorder, again playing on low, the tape hissing between breaths. His grandfather sat in the dark, eyes closed, smiling faintly. The sound filled the air like an old prayer. "Still there?" he whispered when the grandson joined him. Didn't want it to be lonely. The following week, he began confusing the recordings with real moments. When the tape laughed, he laughed back. When it ended, he waited for it to speak again. The grandson didn't stop him. He let the conversation happen, half in memory, half in imagination. It was the closest thing to peace they'd had in months. Then came the morning when he couldn't remember the grandson's name. He paused, searching the air, eyes apologetic. "It's okay," the grandson said quickly, before the fear could spread. "I know who I am." The old man nodded. "That's enough. One of us should." That night, the grandson sat with the broken cassette, mending it with tape and patience. He knew it wouldn't last long, but it felt like something worth fixing. When he pressed play, the laughter wobbled, warped by damage, but still alive. It sounded like resilience bent, imperfect, but breathing. He left it running through the night. The sound of his grandfather's laugh looping softly as the snow thickened outside. The house glowed faintly with the warmth of repetition. Somewhere between midnight and morning, he realized that every version of the laugh, clear, cracked or doubled, was still the same truth, trying to survive time. A new nurse came twice a week now. Her name was Clara, and she carried the calm of someone who had seen many endings disguised as ordinary days. She took his pulse, checked his eyes, asked questions he sometimes answered with a shrug. The grandson stayed close, learning the rhythm of her patience. One afternoon, while she packed her bag, she asked, "Does he still remember the tapes?" "He remembers the laughter," the grandson said. "Maybe not the reason." "That's enough," she replied. "People remember what the heart wants to keep." That night, the old man grew restless. He wandered the hallway, searching for something invisible. "I heard him," he said. "The one from the box." The grandson guided him back to bed, the recorder already playing softly on the nightstand. "He's still here," he said, pointing to the machine. The old man listened, eyes wide, then began to cry, not out of sadness, but confusion. "I didn't know it was me," he said between breaths. "He sounds so alive." "You are," the grandson said. The old man's hand trembled as he reached for the recorder. "Then why does he stop?" The question hung in the room like cold air. The grandson didn't answer. He only took his grandfather's hand and squeezed until the shaking eased. The tape reached its end, clicking softly. Neither of them moved. Over the next few days, the laughter tapes became background music to their lives. They played during meals, naps, long silences. Sometimes the old man joined in, mimicking the sound, almost matching it. Other times, he simply listened, face calm, eyes distant, as though following the voice of someone leading him home. One evening, when the grandson went to close the curtains, he noticed the recorder was gone. Panic rose fast, but before he could search, he heard it through the open window, faint, coming from the porch. The old man sat outside, bundled in a blanket, the recorder in his lap, playing one of the oldest tapes. "Needed fresh air," he said when the grandson stepped out. He was getting stuffy in there. Smiled, the glow of the porch light warming his face. The grandson sat beside him, listening. The tape wobbled once, then steadied. Laughter, wind, the sound of their breathing all layered together. For the first time, grandson didn't think about memory or loss. He just listened, knowing that even if the tape ended, the sound had already found another place to live. By early spring, the old man's world had shrunk to the few rooms that still recognized him. The calendar on the fridge marked months he no longer counted. When the grandson arrived one morning, the recorder was already running, its wheels spinning on silence. The old man looked up from the table, puzzled. "It makes a sound, but I don't know the word for it," he said. "Laughter," grandson answered. "Laughter," he repeated slowly, tasting the word like something new. Then he laughed, half proud, half confused. "Strange. I've been doing it all my life, and now I need a dictionary for it." They went through the old tapes that afternoon. Some were warped beyond saving, others perfectly clear. The old man pointed at one labeled for later and asked, "Did you make that one?" The grandson shook his head. "You did. I must have been having a good day," he said. "Play it, will you?" The voice that came through the speaker was his, younger, steady, saying, "You made me laugh today." "That's enough." The old man smiled faintly, then frowned. "He sounds like someone I used to be friends with." The grandson didn't correct him. He just let the tape play again, softer this time, till the old man's eyelids grew heavy. The disease had become a tide coming in gentle, leaving pieces behind when it pulled away. There were mornings when he knew names, remembered birthdays, laughed at the right moments, and others when even the spoon felt foreign in his hand. The grandson learned to meet him wherever he was on the map that day. Sometimes that meant answering to another name. Sometimes it meant pretending to be a stranger who'd just dropped by for coffee. And sometimes it meant sitting in silence, both of them waiting for a word to return. One evening, the grandson found him standing by the window, holding the recorder close to his ear. "I thought I heard her," he whispered. "Your grandmother. She's in there somewhere," the grandson said. "Mixed in with you." He nodded, eyes bright. "Then she's been laughing all this time." Later that night, after the old man had gone to bed, the grandson rewound the tape again. Through the hiss, a faint sound surfaced, a soft second laugh. Higher, lighter. Maybe feedback. Maybe her. He didn't play it again. Some mysteries are best left breathing. Rain tapped at the windows for most of that week. The old man had grown quieter, speaking less, sleeping more. When he did wake, he asked simple questions that felt enormous. Where do sounds go when they stop? The grandson tried to answer. They stay somewhere. You just can't hear them. "Good," the old man said. "Then I'm not losing them, just lending them out." Each day he grew more fragile, but something gentle hovered in him, a calm acceptance, as if he'd already made peace with the fading. The grandson moved the recorder from the table to his bedside, pressing record whenever the old man smiled. The laughter that came now was thin, almost air, but still real. One afternoon, the nurse found them sitting together in the bedroom. "You keep him busy," she said. The grandson nodded. "He keeps me busy too." She left. The old man turned toward him. "You'll play them when I forget, won't you?" "I will. And if I don't remember even that, then I'll remember for both of us." He seemed satisfied with that. The light from the window caught in his hair, turning it silver. "You sound like someone who's been practicing goodbye," he said. "Maybe I have." He reached for the recorder, pressed play, and together they listened. Laughter filled the small room, layered, imperfect, beautiful. It felt larger than either of them, a bridge built entirely from sound. When the tape ended, the old man sighed. "That's a good one. Save it." "I already did." He leaned back, eyes closing. "Then we're even." That night, the grandson labeled the new cassette room, Rain. Us. He placed it beside the others' rows of small hearts, still beating behind plastic, as he turned off the light. The rain outside seemed to echo the rhythm of the tape reels, soft and steady. He paused in the doorway, listening, certain that somewhere inside those layers of laughter, the old man was still awake, keeping the noise alive for both of them. The first snow came early that year, thick and quiet, the kind that made the street disappear. Inside, the house carried its own kind of stillness. The recorder sat on the table beside a half-full cup of tea, its red light dark for the first time in months. The grandson hesitated before touching it, afraid that pressing play might feel like trespassing. His grandfather slept most of the day now. The illness had turned language into a narrow bridge between moments of clarity and long stretches of silence. When he did wake, he spoke softly, as if not to startle time. "Is it morning?" he would ask, no matter the hour. One afternoon, the grandson played one of the old tapes beside his bed. The room filled with laughter that felt too big for the frail body lying there. The old man smiled, eyes closed. "That's a good sound," he murmured. "Who is it?" "It's you," the grandson said. He nodded slowly. "Then tell him thank you for keeping me company." Later, when the nurse came to check his pulse, she found the grandson sitting quietly, the recorder in his lap. "He's fading," she said gently. "But sometimes people linger for something, some sound, some face." That night, the grandson began sorting through the boxes of tapes. Each label told a story in shorthand. Sunday morning walks, rain again. Good day. He played a few seconds of each and noticed how the laughter changed over time, bright, then hesitant, then soft enough to be mistaken for breathing. The collection was more than memory. It was a record of a man learning how to let go without silence, swallowing him whole. When he returned to the bedroom, his grandfather was awake, eyes unfocused but calm. "Do you remember the river?" the old man asked suddenly. "Of course. We threw pebbles," he said. "I told you to listen to the splash, not watch it. You can't hold water, only sound." The words came clear, strong, then faded again. The grandson reached for the recorder. "Would you like to laugh one more time?" he asked. The old man smiled. "You do it for me?" Or so he did. A small, careful laugh that broke halfway through. The old man's lips moved, repeating it silently, as if trying to remember how. When the laughter ended, the snow outside thickened, covering the porch, the fence, the world. The grandson pressed stop and sat beside the bed until his own breathing matched the rhythm of the machine cooling in his hands. The following morning was clear and sharp, sunlight reflecting off the snow like a warning. The old man hadn't stirred all night. His chest rose gently, the way a curtain moves in a room without wind. The grandson placed the recorder on the nightstand, uncertain if he should start it again. Then, without opening his eyes, the old man said, "Is it still working?" "Yes," the grandson whispered. "Then let it listen." He pressed record. For a moment, there was only the hum of the radiator and the ticking of a distant clock. Then a small sound, barely a laugh, more like a breath-catching light. The old man's lips curved. "Good," he said faintly. "It remembers." The grandson sat beside him, holding his hand as the tape turned. He thought of all the versions of this same sound. The first one in the kitchen, the one by the river, the overlapping ones that had become music through accident. Each was a heartbeat left behind. Minutes passed. The old man's breathing slowed, but never stopped completely. It simply drifted into the rhythm of the tape. The grandson leaned close. "I'm here," he said. The old man's hand twitched once, then rested. "Keep the noise going," he murmured. "I will." The tape reached its end with a click that felt like punctuation. The grandson didn't press stop. He just sat there, letting the machine spin on the empty reel, its faint whir blending with the soft winter quiet. When the nurse arrived later that morning, she understood without asking. The recorder was still running, the room filled with the low hum of its motor, the sound of something refusing to go silent. That evening, the grandson labeled the tape in his neatest handwriting, "Last Laugh, Morning Light." He played it once, just to be sure it had captured everything. There it was, a breath, a faint chuckle, and then a long exhale that sounded almost like peace. He placed it beside the others and closed the drawer. The room was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty. The laughter, now recorded in hundreds of layers, had made the air permanent. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, endless, the world rewinding itself into white. After the winter of the last tape, the house learned a new quiet. It wasn't the hush of fear anymore. It was the stillness that follows work finished. The grandson arrived each morning with a thermos and a list, because grief doesn't organize itself. He gathered the shoeboxes, the plastic cases, the orphaned reels wound tight with rubber bands. On the kitchen table, he lined them up by month the way the old man used to line up screws. Order as a form of love. He borrowed a better player from the library, one with clean heads and a counter that didn't stick. One by one, he fed the tapes through, noting what lived inside them. April laughs, blue morning. For later, he wrote short descriptions in a notebook. 3 seconds bright. Overlap at 0:18. Second voice may be hers. Ends in click. The pencil marks looked like stitches. His aunt came by with a casserole and questions that tried to be practical. "Do you really need to keep all of them?" she asked gently, touching a stack like it might bite. He didn't argue, he only pressed play. The old man's laugh lifted through the kitchen like a bird that remembered the window was open. The aunt put the casserole down and cried into her sleeve. Nobody mentioned storage again. He set up a small transfer station in the living room. Tape deck, laptop, headphones, patience. He digitized the fragile reels, saving them in folders named for weather and days of the week. Each file carried a new timestamp, a modern anchor, but the sound inside remained loyal to its first moment. The hiss became a kind of room tone for absence. He left it in. Cleaned too much, the voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. As he worked, he noticed how the laughter aged. Early tapes rang with metal-bright joy. Middle ones hesitated, and then arrived anyway. Later ones were almost breath. None of them lied. When he reached last laugh, Morning Light, he paused before pressing play, aware he was about to hear the edge again. He listened all the way through. Radiator hum, a small catch of breath, a tiny sound that could have been a chuckle or courage. Then the long exhale, not a door closing, but a window opening to winter. He saved it and named a copy Morning Window for himself. Some things deserve both their title and their nickname. Neighbors began to stop by. The barber from 2 houses down, the woman who delivered mail, the boy who used to toss newspapers and now drove a truck. Each person asked to hear his best one, and each chose a different favorite. The grandson realized there is no single definitive laugh. There are only the ones we need when we need them. At night, he labeled empty cases with dates that would never be filled. A small ceremony for recordings that would not exist. He stacked the finished digital files on an external drive and placed it in the freezer for safekeeping. A family trick for storms in memory. When he told the aunt, she laughed the old man's laugh without meaning to, then covered her mouth, embarrassed. He shook his head. "Keep it," he said. "It fits you." The house no longer waited for footsteps. It waited for the soft click of play. For the moment, a room becomes a witness again. And as the grandson listened, he felt the edges of loss sand themselves down not to nothing, but to a shape the hand could hold. Spring returned with its stubborn green. And the grandson decided the laughter shouldn't live only in drawers and drives. He booked the back room of the library on a Saturday, a space that still smelled like childhood paper and pencil shavings. Made a simple sign, listening hour. A voice remembered. He brought the best deck, a small speaker, a thermos of tea, and a stack of tapes arranged like a tiny city. People came because towns know when to show up. The nurse, the barber, the neighbor with the red scarf, 2 kids who had helped shovel snow, and his aunt with tissues tucked into her sleeve. He began without speeches. He pressed play. The first track was early clear, ringing, the sound of a man who could find his name in any room. Smiles moved through the audience like light through leaves. He let it run into a later tape, where the laugh arrived slower, wearing careful steps. You could feel the room lean forward, listening for the moment it would catch. When it did, someone exhaled audibly, as if rescued from small water between tracks. The grandson said almost nothing. He read a few labels in his grandfather's handwriting, held up the cassette with 4 letters scrawled across it, and let the machine do the rest. The nurse wiped her eyes when the voice said, "You were here. You made me laugh. That's enough." The kids whispered "that's enough" to each other, and didn't know why it mattered yet. Midway through, he played a recording most people would have thrown away, a tangled one where several versions overlapped bright, cracked breathy accident, masquerading as composition. In that layered noise, the room found something generous, a permission to be imperfect and still true. Even the speaker buzzed a little, as if trying to sing along at the end. He played Last Laugh, Morning Light. He didn't announce it. The radiator hum filled the room. The long exhale traveled its small distance. The click marked time, the way a lighthouse marks water you cannot see. No one moved for a count of 10. Then chairs sighed, and someone coughed softly, and the world resumed its ordinary courage. Afterward, people lingered. The barber told a story about the old man tipping too much and pretending it was an accident. The nurse described the porch night with the blanket and the tape. The neighbor in the red scarf said, "He made every hello sound like relief." The grandson wrote their sentences down, because laughter needs company and language too at home. He put the tapes back in their boxes and returned them to the shelf. The house sounded different now, not because the recordings had changed, but because the listening had. He poured tea and stood by the open window, letting traffic and birds and human voices drift in. He didn't press play. He didn't need to. Somewhere downstairs, a radio in another apartment caught a song that made someone laugh. The sound rose through the floorboards and found him where he stood. He smiled, small and certain, hearing in it the old man's timbre, not as a copy, but as a shape the world now carried. He turned off the light and left the window open a little. The room ready for whatever noise is tomorrow, might want to leave behind. A year passed before the grandson could walk into that house without feeling the weight of his grandfather's absence like a change in weather. Dust gathered on the shelves where the recorder once lived. The tapes, neatly boxed, seemed to hum even in silence, a low vibration that memory makes when it refuses to fade. He had finished digitizing every sound, but still some nights he dreamt of rewinding. On the anniversary of his grandfather's passing, he decided to return not for ceremony, just to see what time had done to the air. The house smelled faintly of pine and tea, as if it still remembered who it belonged to. The keys were in their usual drawer, the curtains half open. He stood for a while before the table, tracing the marks left by the recorder's rubber feet. He unpacked the old device, same one he'd kept sealed in a box for safekeeping. Its plastic felt lighter now, almost hollow. But when he placed fresh batteries inside, the red light blinked obediently to life. "You're still stubborn," he whispered. He set it down on the table and pressed play. The first sound was the hiss, then a laugh. Soft and slow, followed by another, overlapping slightly. It filled the kitchen, alive again, looping through space like sunlight through water. He sat down and listened, eyes closed. For a moment, the years elapsed, and he was a boy again, hearing his grandfather laugh at a joke too small to remember. When the tape ended, he stayed still, the quiet around him vast and forgiving. It struck him that grief doesn't end. It just changes frequency. You stop hearing it all the time, but it's still there, humming under everything else. He took out his phone and recorded the room. Not the tape, not his own voice, just the sound of the space breathing. Wind through the curtain, floorboards settling, faint birds outside. He titled the file after the laugh. Later, he walked to the river. The same one his grandfather had once talked about, the one where you can't hold water, only sound. The water moved the same way, restless and sure of itself. He placed the recorder on the railing, pressed record, and let it capture the current. The hiss of the river merged with the faint hum of cars and distant bells. Before leaving, he spoke softly into the microphone. "Still here," he said. Then he let the recorder keep rolling as he walked away. At home, he played the new tape. The sound of the river, the wind, the faint footsteps fading out, it all mixed into something whole. He realized that he was no longer recording memory. He was recording proof of continuity. The world hadn't stopped when his grandfather did it, had simply learned to carry his echo that night. He left the recorder running on the windowsill, its red light blinking against the dark. He didn't rewind this one. Some tapes are meant to play forward only. Months later, the grandson packed the recorder and tapes into a wooden box to donate to the small local museum. They had opened a section called Ordinary Lives, a place for stories that might have vanished otherwise. The curator, a woman with careful hands, listened as he explained the history, how his grandfather had recorded his own laughter so he wouldn't forget the sound. She asked, "Do you want it to play on loop in the exhibit?" He thought for a long moment. "No," he said. "Let it play only when someone presses the button. It should feel like being invited." When the display opened, he visited quietly. The sign read, "Memory as sound, a life remembered in laughter." A pair of headphones rested beside the recorder. People came and went, some smiling, some wiping their eyes. One boy listened twice, then looked up at his father. "He sounds happy," he said. The father nodded. "That's the point." Standing in the corner, the grandson felt something gentle settle in him, not pride, not sadness, but gratitude that the noise had found a home larger than grief. He stepped closer to the recorder, pressed play, and heard it again. That familiar laugh, that brief shimmer of recognition between past and present. Outside, the afternoon light tilted golden. He walked toward the park, passing a woman humming to herself, a group of kids shouting, a bus driver laughing into his radio. The city itself seemed full of small inheritances of sound, fragments of people refusing to vanish. When he reached the river, he took out his phone and opened the recording labeled after the laugh. The rush of water filled his ears, followed by the faintest trace of his own voice saying, "Still here?" He smiled. It didn't sound like loss anymore. It sounded like belonging. That evening, back home, he sat by the window and let the open air mix with everything he'd saved. Wind, river, laughter, breath. He pressed record one last time, capturing the city at dusk. Then his own quiet laugh joining it. He labeled the file Inheritance, placed it next to Morning Window and After the Laugh, and closed the folder. The red light blinked once, then went dark, content. The room held its silence gently, like a secret passed down. And somewhere inside that stillness, the echo of his grandfather's laughter remained, not trapped, not fading, just alive in the air that keeps everything going.